Have you ever wondered if that old coin in your pocket or collection could be worth a fortune? Some rare coins have sold for millions of dollars, making them some of the most valuable collectibles in the world. In this video, we'll explore the most valuable coins and what makes them worth so much. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss this. The 1911 Abraham Lincoln Wheat Penny. But there's a catch. Today, we'll be focusing on the 1911 penny without a mint mark and what its value looks like in today's market even if it's in dirty condition. So, let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about the coin itself. The Lincoln Wheat Penny, introduced in 1909, is one of the most iconic coins in American history. It features a profile of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and two stalks of wheat on the reverse, which is why it's called the Wheat Penny. Now, the 1911 Wheat Penny specifically stands out among the other years because it's one of the more common ones. That means, compared to rarer years, there are a lot of these coins floating around. But here's the interesting part when it comes to determining the value of a coin: its condition matters a lot. When we talk about a dirty coin, we're not referring to a coin that's been intentionally harmed or altered, but rather one that's been through the test of time exposed to dirt, grime, and even rust. And while cleaning your coins is typically a no-no in the collecting world, sometimes it's hard to avoid this condition, especially when dealing with a coin that's seen a lot of use. So, how much is a 1911 penny without a mint mark worth today, in dirty condition? Well, here's the thing. While dirty pennies may not be fetching top dollar, their value can still surprise you. In today's market, a 1911 Lincoln Wheat Penny, in poor or dirty condition, can be worth around $80 to $90. You might be thinking, that's not much. But remember, coin collecting is all about rarity and demand. Now, if we're talking about higher grades like good or very fine, that value can increase. But in a dirty, well-worn condition, don't expect more than a couple bucks for your penny. The real kicker is if you find one in mint condition or uncirculated, it could fetch up to $115 to $120 or even more depending on the market at the time. But remember, if it's dirty, don't expect those top-tier prices. While the 1911 without a mint mark is not as valuable as rarer coins like the 1909 SVDB, it's still a neat piece of history that many collectors love to hold on to. If you come across one of these in your change, don't immediately write it off as worthless just because it looks worn or dirty. There could be hidden value there, especially if it's a rare variety or has unique characteristics. To wrap things up, the value of a 1911 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark in dirty condition typically hovers around $200. But if you find a cleaner, higher-grade example, you could be looking at a much higher return on your investment. If you're serious about coin collecting, even the dirtier pennies can still be a cool addition to your collection. Next up, the 1979 Washington Quarter. You may be wondering, is the 1979 Washington Quarter worth anything? Well, the short answer is yes, it does hold value, especially when it's in fine condition. So, what's the value of this coin today? Let's break it down. First, let's take a quick look at the 1979 Washington Quarter and its background. The Washington Quarter series, which began in 1932, has been a staple of U.S. coinage for decades. This coin, in particular, is known for its striking design, featuring the profile of the first U.S. President George Washington on the obverse and an eagle on the reverse. Here on the obverse, we see George Washington's iconic portrait designed by John Flanagan. This design has remained largely unchanged for the majority of the Washington Quarter series. It's simple, but powerful, and it represents the enduring legacy of America's first president. Now, when you examine the 1979 Washington Quarter, you'll notice something important. There's no mint mark. For the Washington Quarter, the mint mark indicates where the coin was produced, and in this case, the absence of a mint mark means that this quarter was minted at the Philadelphia Mint. Coins without mint marks are typically from the Philadelphia Mint, which has produced many of the nation's coins throughout history. Next, let's talk about the condition of the coin. This 1979 quarter is graded as fine condition. For coin collectors, coin grading is important because it determines the value of a coin. In the case of a fine condition coin, you can expect to see some wear on the surface, but the details of the coin, such as Washington's face, the eagle's wings, and the text, are still clearly visible. In fine condition, the coin shows noticeable wear but not excessive damage. Washington's portrait may have some softness on the high points, and the eagle's feathers on the reverse may also appear less distinct than they would on an uncirculated coin. However, all the major details should still be legible, and the coin remains easily recognizable. So how much is this 1979 Washington quarter worth today? Well, the value depends on a few factors. Primarily the silver content, condition, and collector demand. Let's break it down. The 1979 Washington quarter is composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, meaning it's not a silver coin like the pre-1965 quarters, which contained 90% silver. However, this doesn't mean the 1979 coin is worthless. It still holds some value because it's a part of the regular circulating coins in the Washington quarter series. The price of a 1979 Washington quarter in fine condition today is primarily driven by its status as a historical coin and its demand among collectors. Now, in terms of market value, a 1979 Washington quarter in fine condition is typically worth anywhere between $9,000. This value might be slightly higher depending on the specific market trends at the time or the overall demand for Washington quarters in your area. While this coin isn't super rare or highly valuable like some other Washington quarters from earlier years, it still holds a modest value due to its historical importance and the fact that it's part of a larger coin series that spans many decades. If you happen to come across a 1979 Washington quarter in better condition, let's say it's graded as very fine, or even uncirculated, the value could increase significantly. A well-preserved 1979 quarter could fetch anywhere from $14,000 or more, depending on the condition and collector interest. Next up, we're diving into one of the most interesting pennies in American history, the 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny, specifically the large date version, and we're going to take a close look at its value in today's market. We'll also be talking about what it's worth if it's in good condition. So, let's get started. First, let's break down what we mean by the 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny, large date. In 1940, the U.S. Mint produced two varieties of this penny, the small date and the large date. The large date version, which has a noticeably larger 40 on the date, is the one we're focusing on today. It's an interesting and significant variety that collectors keep an eye out for. Here's the thing. While both the small date and large date pennies from 1940 are fairly common, the large date version stands out for collectors, especially in good condition. In fact, it's one of the more sought-after dates in the wheat penny series, and the value can vary depending on the coin's condition. So, what does good condition mean? In the world of coin collecting, a coin that's in good condition is one that still has its basic design visible, but it's had some wear and tear over the years. The details are a bit worn, but it's still very recognizable. For the 1940 large date penny, a good condition coin will still show a decent amount of the wheat stalks on the reverse, and the facial features of President Lincoln on the obverse. In good condition meaning you can still make out the basic features, but it's showing wear. You can typically expect the value of a 1940 large date penny to range anywhere from $225 to $350. It's definitely not a rare coin by any means, but it still holds some value, especially if you're looking for coins to fill out your collection. Now, if you happen to stumble upon a 1940 large date penny in mint condition, it could fetch significantly more, up to around $500 depending on the market. However, it's important to note that finding a mint state version of this penny is pretty rare, and most 1940 pennies you'll find in circulation will likely be in lower grades. Even though this penny might not be one of the more valuable coins out there, it's still a great piece to add to your collection if you love the Lincoln Wheat series. Plus, these pennies are often found in change, so they're accessible for beginning collectors who want to get into the hobby without breaking the bank. So, to recap, if you've got a 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny with a large date in good condition, you're looking at a value of around $540. If it's in better condition, like very fine or extremely fine, you could see higher values. And while this isn't a rare coin, it's still a fun and collectible piece of American history. Next up, the 1982 Washington quarter with D mint mark. While this coin is fairly common in circulation, it has some unique characteristics that make it worth talking about, especially when it's in good condition. You might even notice it has a blackish color shade, which we'll discuss as well. So, what's the value of this quarter today? Let's find out. Let's start with a quick overview of the 1982 Washington Quarter. As part of the ongoing Washington Quarter series, this coin features the familiar portrait of George Washington on the obverse, designed by John Flanagan. On the reverse, we see the classic eagle, which has been a part of the design since the first Washington Quarters were issued in 1932. Now, the Washington Quarter has been in circulation for nearly 90 years, and over the years it has undergone various design changes. However, the basic structure has remained the same, with George Washington's bust taking center stage on the obverse and the eagle on the reverse. For our 1982 coin, this design is as iconic as ever, and it was struck during a period when U.S. coins were transitioning away from silver. But this particular quarter still holds significance because of the composition and the era it represents. One key detail we need to mention is the D mint mark on the reverse of this coin. This tells us that the coin was minted at the Denver Mint, which is one of the primary facilities responsible for producing U.S. coins. The mint mark is a small but significant feature for collectors, as it allows them to distinguish between coins minted at different locations. Now, let's talk about the condition of this specific coin. You'll notice it has a blackish color shade. This is likely the result of environmental factors, such as exposure to dirt, moisture, or oxidation over time. This type of discoloration can occur when coins are circulated for many years and accumulate dirt and grime. In addition to the color, this coin is graded in what we call good condition. So, what does good condition actually mean in the world of coin collecting? A coin in good condition will typically have worn surfaces with most of the major details still visible but slightly faded. For a Washington quarter, you might see heavy wear on the high points of the design, especially on Washington's portrait. The coin is still recognizable, but the finer details may be less sharp or a bit faded. The black color shade we see here could obscure some of those finer features, but the main design elements are still identifiable. Coin grading can be a bit tricky, but understanding it is key to knowing how much your coin is worth. For the 1982 Washington quarter in good condition, the value is influenced by its condition, its silver content, and demand in the collector market. Even though this coin may not be in top shape, it still has intrinsic value because of its silver content. Now, here's something important to note. While this quarter is in good condition, it's also made from a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Unlike earlier Washington quarters minted before 1965, this 1982 coin doesn't contain silver, as the U.S. Mint stopped using silver in circulating coins after 1964. So, while it doesn't carry the same premium as older silver quarters, its value is still influenced by factors like condition and demand. So, what's the current value of the 1982 Washington quarter with D mint mark in good condition? In today's market, a 1982 Washington quarter in this condition is generally worth around $32,000. It's not a highly valuable coin, especially considering it's not silver, but it still holds some value due to its historical significance and the fact that it's part of the larger Washington Quarter series. If you happen to find a 1982 Washington quarter in better condition, like very fine or uncirculated, the value could increase, with prices ranging from $40,000 or more, depending on its exact state and demand. But for now, in good condition, the value remains relatively modest. It's also worth mentioning that coin values can fluctuate over time based on demand, the overall state of the economy, and the silver market. While this coin may not be worth a lot right now, if you're holding on to one in better condition or a rare variation, it might be worth more in the future. Always keep an eye on market trends and get your coins professionally graded if you think they might be worth more than you realize. So, there you have it. The 1982 Washington quarter with D mint mark in good condition, with a blackish color shade, is worth around $57,000 in today's market. While it's not a super valuable coin on its own, it's still an interesting part of U.S. coinage history. If you have one of these in your collection, or if you found one in your pocket change, you're holding on to a piece of American numismatic history. Next up, We're going to be talking about a specific Abraham Lincoln wheat penny, the 1954 large date with an S mint mark, and we'll dive into its value in today's market, especially if it's in extra fine condition. So, if you've got one of these coins tucked away, stick around to find out how much it's really worth. First off, let's talk about the coin itself. The 1954 Lincoln wheat penny is part of the famous wheat penny series, which was minted from 1909 to 1958. This particular coin, with the large date and the S mint mark, was produced at the San Francisco Mint, and it's one of the more popular varieties among collectors. Now, what's special about this penny for starters? The large date version was struck in 1954, and it's distinguishable by the larger 54 on the date. The S mint mark tells us that it was minted in San Francisco, and this is crucial because San Francisco minted coins tend to have a slightly higher demand among collectors compared to their Philadelphia counterparts, especially if they're in good condition. When we talk about extra fine condition, we're talking about a coin that's seen some circulation but still retains a lot of fine detail. On a 1954 S large date penny in extra fine condition, the design features, such as the wheat stalks on the reverse and President Lincoln's profile, will be sharp, and only slight wear will be noticeable on the highest points of the coin. These types of coins are in great shape, and that's what makes them valuable. If you have one of these pennies in extra fine condition, it can typically be worth between $50. It's not going to make you rich, but it's still a solid return for a penny that's more than 60 years old. But the value can increase if the coin is in even better condition, like AU, almost uncirculated, or MS, mint state. In AU condition, the coin could fetch around $110, and in mint state, especially if it's perfectly uncirculated, you could see values up to $155 to $170 or more, depending on market demand. Now, just because this coin is in great condition, it doesn't mean it's super rare. 1954. S large date pennies are still considered fairly common when compared to other rare years. However, they are one of the more popular dates among collectors, which is why they're still worth something, especially when they're in such good shape. It's important to remember that while 1954 S large date pennies are relatively abundant, the condition of the coin plays a massive role in its value. Even small details can make a big difference. So if you happen to find one of these pennies in your collection or change, take the time to inspect it carefully. Next up, the 1968 Washington quarter with D mint mark. Now, this particular quarter isn't in pristine condition. It's actually in what we call dirty condition, but that doesn't mean it's without value. So, how much is this coin worth today? Let's find out. Before we dive into the value, let's talk a bit about the 1968 Washington quarter. This quarter is part of the Washington quarter series, which has been in circulation since 1932. The 1968 coin features the classic design of George Washington on the obverse, with his iconic profile created by artist John Flanagan. On the reverse, we find the traditional eagle design representing strength and freedom. This quarter was minted during a period when the U.S. Mint still produced coins in silver, although the silver content would soon be reduced in 1965. Now, the 1968 Washington quarter is significant for a few reasons. First, it's part of a transitional period in U.S. coinage. While the minting of silver coins would soon end, the 1968 quarter still contains 40% silver. That silver content makes it more valuable than its copper-nickel counterparts, but it's not as rare as the earlier pre-1965 quarters, which were composed of 90% silver. If you look closely, you'll see a mint mark, the letter D on the reverse of the coin. This means the quarter was minted at the Denver Mint. The D mint mark helps collectors differentiate between coins produced at different minting facilities. So while the 1968 Washington quarter is relatively common in terms of mintage, those with the D mint mark still have a special place in the world of coin collecting. Now, let's talk about the condition of this particular coin. This quarter isn't in pristine, shiny shape. It's in what's known as dirty condition. When a coin is described this way, it usually means it's been circulated for a long time and has accumulated dirt, grime, and possibly tarnish or staining. In this case, we see a blackish shade on the surface of the coin, which is often the result of environmental exposure, handling, and general wear and tear. So, how does this affect the value? Well, coins in dirty condition typically experience a decrease in value. The reason is that collectors prefer coins that are well preserved and have as much of their original detail as possible. When a coin is dirty, stained, or damaged, its appeal is lower, and that usually means a reduction in price. However, just because this coin is in dirty condition doesn't mean it has no value. To give you a better idea of how much this 1968 Washington quarter with the D mint mark is worth today, let's break it down. In dirty condition, this coin is typically valued at around $45,000, depending on the severity of the dirt and how much of the coin's design has been affected. While it may not fetch a high price in this state, it still holds value thanks to its silver content and historical significance. Now, if this coin were to be cleaned and restored to a higher condition, its value could increase. But be careful, cleaning coins is a controversial topic in the coin collecting world. In fact, cleaning a coin can often damage its surface and lower its value even further. So, if you come across a coin in dirty condition, it's usually best to leave it as is and avoid cleaning it yourself. Of course, the value of a coin like the 1968 Washington quarter can fluctuate over time. While a coin in dirty condition may not be worth much today, that could change depending on market trends, collector demand, and the overall condition of other similar coins. Additionally, the silver content always gives these coins a floor value, meaning it will never be worth less than the intrinsic silver content, which in the case of a 1968 quarter is around $150 for the 40% silver content, depending on the spot price of silver. Remember, the silver content of the 1968 Washington quarter is important because it provides a baseline value for the coin. In today's silver market, 40% silver coins like this one typically hold a value that reflects the current price of silver. So, even if the coin is in poor or dirty condition, it still has value based on the silver content itself. If you have a 1968 Washington quarter in dirty condition and are thinking about selling it, you might want to get it professionally appraised by a reputable dealer or a grading service. They can give you a more accurate estimate of the coin's value based on its current state and any potential market fluctuations. Next up, the 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny, specifically the large date variety, and we're going to dive into how much it's worth today, especially if it has a full red color shade and is in fine condition. So, if you have one of these in your collection, keep watching. The camera zooms in on a 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny with the large date clearly visible and the full red color showing off its natural hue. First, let's take a quick look at the coin itself. The 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny is part of the last year in the iconic Wheat Penny series, 1909 to 1958. The large date variety features a larger on the date, which makes it easily distinguishable from the small date version. So, what makes this coin really interesting is the full red color shade, and we're going to explain why that's so important for its value. Now, you might be wondering, why is the full red color shade such a big deal? Well, coins like the 1957 large date penny that have a full red appearance, meaning they've retained their original copper color without any noticeable toning, are often valued higher than those that have aged into more of a brown or coppery tone. The red color shows that the coin has been well preserved and hasn't been exposed to harsh elements, which is something collectors really appreciate. Now let's talk about what fine condition means. In coin collecting, fine condition refers to a coin that has a significant amount of detail, but with wear that's noticeable on the high points of the design. For the 1957 large date penny, this means that you can still clearly see the features like Lincoln's profile, the wheat stalks on the reverse, and the date, but they might show some light wear. So let's break it down. How much is a 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny with a large date and full red color shade in fine condition worth in today's market? Well, in fine condition with that nice red color, it's typically worth around $10 to $20. While that may not sound like much, there's more to it. Full red color coins like this one tend to fetch a slightly higher price than their brown or circulated counterparts. So, even in fine condition, a 1957 large date penny with a full red shade can be valued higher than other pennies that show more wear or tarnish. Now, if you happen to find a 1957 large date penny in better condition, let's say in very fine or even extremely fine condition, you could see the value jump up. In very fine condition, it could be worth around $30 to $50. And in extremely fine condition, you might be looking at $60 to $80. But again, it's the full red color that adds that extra appeal. Collectors really love coins that retain their original red hue because they're often seen as more visually appealing. They're also generally viewed as better investments over time because their quality and aesthetic appeal are preserved. So, if you've got a 1957 large date penny that's in full red color and fine condition, hold on to it. It's a great coin to have in your collection. To recap, the value of a 1957 Lincoln wheat penny with a large date and full red color shade in fine condition typically falls between $95 to $100. If the coin is in better condition, the value can rise to $3, $5, or even more, depending on how well it's been preserved. Up the 1970 Washington quarter. This coin might not seem extraordinary at first glance, but in the right condition, it holds some serious value in the market. Specifically, we're going to be discussing the 1970 Washington quarter without a mint mark, graded in extra fine condition. So how much is this coin worth today? Let's take a deep dive into its history, features, and value. First, let's get familiar with the Washington quarter itself. The Washington quarter was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Since then, it has remained one of the most iconic coins in the United States. The design, created by artist John Flanagan, features a portrait of George Washington on the obverse and an eagle on the reverse. This design has remained largely unchanged for decades, making the Washington quarter a staple in the world of U.S. numismatics. Now, for the 1970 Washington quarter specifically, this is a coin that was struck by the U.S. Mint during a time when coin production was relatively high. There were millions of these quarters minted that year. But there's something important to note. The 1970 Washington quarter, unlike some other years, does not have a mint mark on it. Why does that matter? Well, the absence of a mint mark means that this quarter was minted at the Philadelphia Mint, the main minting facility for the U.S. at the time. On the reverse of the 1970 Washington quarter, you'll find a stunning depiction of an eagle perched on a branch. The coin's reverse also includes the words United States of America and E pluribus unum, which are typical inscriptions on American coinage. The coin's design is quite simple but elegant, and it has been beloved by collectors for generations. Now that we know a little bit about the 1970 Washington quarter, let's talk about its condition. If you're unfamiliar with coin grading, here's a quick overview. Coins are graded on a scale from poor to perfect uncirculated. The higher the grade, the more valuable the coin. Extra fine is a high grade that indicates a coin has been well preserved but shows slight wear from circulation. For a coin like the 1970 Washington quarter, this means that the details on both the obverse and reverse are still sharp, and the coin is in great shape, but you may notice some very light wear on the highest points of the design. In an extra fine coin, you'll notice that Washington's portrait is well defined, and the eagle's features on the reverse are also clearly visible. The wear is minimal, with only slight flattening on the highest points of the coin's design. This is a coin that has been in circulation but has been kept in good condition, which makes it highly desirable to collectors. So, with all this in mind, how much is the 1970 Washington quarter worth today in extra fine condition? Well, in today's market, the value of a 1970 Washington quarter in extra fine condition typically ranges from $12,000. It's not a particularly rare coin, as millions were minted that year, but it does have a bit of a premium over face value because of its condition. The value can fluctuate a bit depending on demand and market conditions, but this range is a good ballpark figure. Now, if we compare this to lower grade coins, you can see the difference. A 1970 Washington quarter in good or fine condition might be worth closer to its face value, of while a coin in very fine or uncirculated condition can fetch a higher price. For example, A well-preserved 1970 Washington quarter in uncirculated condition could be valued between $20,000, depending on the exact quality and buyer interest. Remember, the value of coins is not always set in stone. Coin values can be influenced by various factors, including collector demand, overall mintage, and the broader market. Some years or mint marks can be more valuable than others, but for the 1970 Washington quarter without a mint mark, its value is relatively stable within this price range for coins in extra fine condition. If you have a 1970 Washington quarter in your collection and you think it might be in extra fine condition, it's a good idea to get it professionally graded. Services like the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation (NGC) or the Professional Coin Grading Service (PCGS) can evaluate the coin's condition and provide an official grade, which could potentially increase its value, especially if it's in better condition than initially thought. Next up, the classic coins in American history, the 1937 Lincoln Wheat Penny, specifically the large date version without a mint mark. And we're going to explore what it's worth in fine condition in today's coin market. Let's start with a little background. The 1937 Wheat Penny was minted during the Great Depression era, a time when every penny truly counted. This particular version we're talking about today was minted in Philadelphia, which is why there's no mint mark under the date. The large date design in 1937 isn't an official variety like some other years, but most examples from that year are considered standard-sized dates, which are sometimes casually referred to as large date by collectors. So we're focusing on the regular 1937 penny without a mint mark in fine condition. So what does fine condition mean? Well, in coin grading terms, a coin in fine condition has moderate to heavy wear. You'll still see the major details, but the finer lines like Lincoln's hair and the tops of the wheat stalks are mostly worn down. Still, the design is fully visible and the coin is easily identifiable. In today's market, a 1937 wheat penny without a mint mark in fine condition is typically worth between 15 cents and 40 cents. It's a very common date, with over 309 million coins struck in Philadelphia that year, so it's not rare, but it still holds value for collectors filling out their Lincoln Series books. Now, if your coin is in better condition, say very fine or extremely fine, the value can go up to $10 or more. And in uncirculated mint state condition, a red example could be worth $170 to $200 or higher, depending on its eye appeal and strike quality. Keep in mind, the real value often depends on overall eye appeal, whether the coin has any damage, corrosion, or discoloration. Even in fine condition, a clean, original surface can fetch the upper end of the price range. So while the 1937 wheat penny isn't going to buy you a car, it's a cool, historical coin to have in your collection. And if you're collecting the full wheat penny set, this one is a must-have to complete the pre-Woot years. Next up, the 1967 Washington Quarter. This coin is part of the iconic Washington Quarter series, and while it's not the oldest quarter out there, it still holds an important place in American numismatic history. So, what's the value of the 1967 Washington Quarter in very fine condition? Let's find out. Let's start with a brief overview of the 1967 Washington Quarter. The Washington Quarter has been in circulation since 1932, and the design has remained relatively consistent over the years. On the obverse, we have a profile of George Washington, and on the reverse, an eagle perched on an olive branch. But for today's coin, we're specifically looking at the 1967 version, which has some notable features. On the front of the coin, we see the iconic bust of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan. This portrait was chosen to honor America's first president. The design hasn't changed much over the years, making it one of the most recognizable images in U.S. coinage. The year 1967 is prominently displayed below Washington's bust, giving us the date of this particular quarter. Turning the coin over, we find the reverse, which features an eagle perched on an olive branch, symbolizing peace and strength. This design, also created by John Flanagan, has been part of the Washington Quarter series for decades, and it's a beautiful representation of the strength and freedom of the United States. The inscriptions around the eagle include United States of America, E pluribus unum, and of course, $quarter, indicating its value. Now, let's talk about an important feature of this coin, the mint mark, or rather, the lack of one. As you can see, there's no mint mark on this 1967 Washington quarter. This means it was minted at the Philadelphia Mint. Quarters produced at the Philadelphia Mint don't have a mint mark, so if you're looking at a 1967 Washington quarter without a mint mark, you can be sure it came from this facility. Now let's move on to the condition of this coin. This particular 1967 Washington quarter is graded in very fine condition, which means it has been circulated but is still in relatively good shape. In coin grading, very fine means that the coin has light wear, but the major features are still clearly visible. For the Washington quarter, you'll still be able to see the details in Washington's portrait and the eagle's feathers, though there may be some flattening of the high points from circulation. In very fine condition, the coin will show some moderate wear, especially on the high points like the tips of Washington's hair, the eagle's wings, and the lettering around the coin. However, the most important details will still be recognizable, and the overall look of the coin will still be quite attractive. So, what's the value of the 1967 Washington quarter in very fine condition? The value of this coin comes from a few factors: its silver content, its condition, and its demand in the collector market. Let's break it down. The 1967 Washington quarter, like other quarters minted prior to 1965, contains 90% silver. This is an important detail because it adds intrinsic value to the coin. Silver prices fluctuate over time, so the value of a silver coin like this is partially determined by the current price of silver in the market. At the time of filming, silver is trading around $25 per ounce, which adds to the value of this quarter's silver content. Now, in terms of market value, a 1967 Washington quarter in very fine condition is generally worth between $45 and $50 today. This value is primarily based on the silver content, which makes it worth more than its face value. However, the exact price can vary depending on the silver market, the condition of the coin, and demand from collectors. If you happen to find a 1967 Washington quarter in better condition, say in extremely fine, or even uncirculated condition, the value could increase. A coin in excellent condition could be worth more, with prices ranging from $12 to $25 or even higher, depending on the specific condition and collector interest. So, there you have it. The 1967 Washington quarter in very fine condition is worth around $6 to $10 today, mainly due to its silver content and the fact that it's part of an iconic series of U.S. coins. While this quarter may not be super rare or highly sought after by collectors, it's still a valuable piece of American coinage history. If you have one of these in your collection or have found one in your pocket change, you've got a piece of U.S. numismatic history that still holds a decent amount of value. Thanks for tuning in. If you've got any 1967 Washington quarters or other interesting coins, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to your channel name, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Until next time, happy collecting.